Um, so, all right. So, my section was pages 241 through 249 of chapter 9. So, I am just going to start.
Go team.
All right. So, today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the functions of small groups and joining small groups. So, we form small groups because we believe that they will help us in some way. And small groups can focus on discrete tasks. They can evaluate and advise. They can create art and ideas, provide service and support, promote social networking. Small groups can compete with each other and they can help us learn. So I'm going to kind of examine these different functions for small groups to give you guys kind of a better idea of what purpose each focus serves. So the first small group focus is on discrete tasks. And one function of some of the groups is to accomplish specific assigned tasks. One example of this would be like a jury that is assembled for like a criminal or a civil case. The jury is a group that hears evidence, takes part in deliberation, and then fulfills its mission by communicating the verdict to the courthouse, the judge, and everybody else. Another example of this is kind of our group right here. We formed a group to complete our group discussion speeches and also our persuasive speeches down the line. So we were able to kind of form a small group to organize meetings and times where we can all gather to achieve our tasks. And then some of the ways we can motivate action for the group assignment would be to kind of remind your group members that their contributions matter and that any contribution to the group work is valued and appreciated. Another is setting concrete deadlines for moving forward so that everybody's kind of on the same page with what needs to be done. And then communication is also another important part of that, just to make sure that everybody knows what they're doing and what the portions of the project are for. So these kind of motivational actions, as I like to call them, can make group work tolerable and will make it easier to kind of rely on your group members to make sure the work is being done. The second small group focus is to evaluate and advise. And so an example of this would be kind of like how the president of the United States appoints a cabinet. It's kind of like 15 individual members who are part of a group. And they had like different governmental agencies. They also meet regularly to advise the president on issues related to like domestic and foreign policy. And even though the group members kind of change, like with new presidents and stuff, throughout the years, their goals for the advisement remain the same. Other small groups advise on like an as needed basis. So like kind of like focus groups. Focus groups can provide feedback like on a new product for a business before it's available to the general public. And they can kind of advise a company on things such as like the product's name or the packaging so they can get a general feel for how the product is going to be received when it's like made publicly available. The third small group focus is to create art and ideas. These groups have they're very common to most of us. So like think of any kind of music group or television group or a film that can be considered a small group to create art and ideas. And then when you consider the television aspect, some companies use brainstorming groups to generate innovative ways of thinking. The fourth small group is to provide service and support. So these groups can provide a community service to those who need it. They can also provide social and emotional support for people dealing with difficult circumstances. And those circumstances can be like those battling health concerns or coping with prejudice or discrimination that they experience. And being able to listen to other stories in a support group may help an individual feel less alone and better able to control like their problem behavior. The fifth small group promotes social networking. So again, this is probably pretty common with all of us. Most of us have like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. We can join groups. We can join LinkedIn for jobs or chat rooms, even to make us feel a part of a group. And that can kind of help us meet, communicate, and get to know each other. And then some small groups also compete. So this is like, you know, whether you're in high school or college, you can join like an athletic team and you can compete in their respective sport. Another would be like an academic competition like the Quiz Bowl, where you guys just kind of work interdependently by accomplishing missions to, you know, be smart and be awesome at a Quiz Bowl. So other small groups also help us learn. So I know like in my experience, like with my OTA program, I formed a lot of like study groups and stuff like that. So we could kind of talk about like ways to like study ways to kind of tackle exams and way to kind of figure out like a teacher's way of teaching and what they're going to be able to like expect and stuff like that. So as we can see, small groups, they can enact several different functions to help us achieve goals in a given circumstance. And so the next topic I'm going to discuss is joining small groups. And so the first group, which most of us belong to, is a family. And because we're either born or adopted into that family, we have little say over our membership. So throughout our life, we can join a variety of small groups, and we join small groups for many different reasons. Some of those reasons are because we need to belong. We are very social beings, and so family and friends can meet many of our social needs, but small groups can also give us a sense of social belonging. We also join small groups for protection. So when we join a group, we feel better protected from threats or problems, along with feeling more comfortable. Some protection in small groups can also be physical, where if something goes wrong, you kind of know that somebody in your group or your group as a whole kind of has your back. And we can also gain social or emotional protection from groups. So many people battling like addiction or alcohol, drugs, gambling problems, they can gain support from groups experiencing kind of the same troubles as themselves. And then even in like, I know like in AA, some people are assigned a sponsor for accountability so that they don't feel like super alone in their journey. We join small groups to improve our effectiveness. Some groups offer mutual encouragement, such as like weight loss groups. You can kind of hold each other accountable. Again, you guys can kind of give tips and stuff and pointers for like dieting and stuff like that. You can also kind of join like a group to hone in on a certain skill. So like you can join like an investment group if you want to learn about investing. You can join like a sports group like golf to kind of like see how other people golf, and like you can learn from them, and then you can kind of put that into motion on the course yourself. We also join small groups because we feel a pressure to join. So with our freedom, we choose our groups, but sometimes we do feel pressure to join. So like an example of this would be like if your friend group decides that they support like a political candidate, you might feel pressure to like support that political candidate, even if you don't like totally agree with their views or their policies and stuff like that. Um, so like as with any group, something like that can be taken positively or negatively. So depending on what you learn or take out of the experience. The next thing I was going to talk about is socializing in small groups. So socializing in groups can kind of be broken down into 5 phases. The first one is the antecedent phase. This is before you join a group and you develop certain beliefs and attitudes and different kind of expectations about that group. So like if you were in a group before and you did like the bulk of the work in a group project, you might have like a little less optimistic viewpoint of group work the next time you're assigned to work a group point or a group project. The next one's the anticipatory phase. This phase is us forming judgments about what to expect from the group work. You may have to alter your expectations in the group, which can be kind of difficult if you've had an idea of like what you thought the group work was going to be, but then it's completely different when you start talking about it. The next one's the encounter phase. This is the first time the group meets. This is important to kind of delegate tasks and discuss the group defined goals and the, the end game of what you want from the group. The group also assigns roles and responsibilities during the encounter phase. The next one's the assimilation phase. And this is kind of once the expectation of the group's culture is known, the individual members can decide whether to accept them. This is kind of when the group forms its identity, and some members accept the culture of the group while others are not, and they might end up leaving the group, which leads me to the final stage. This is the exit phase. And so this is when individual members kind of leave voluntary or involuntary. Some people might become dissatisfied with the group work and members, but this is also when something like a group project, like our group project, ends and the members are no longer a part of that group because the goal has been met. And that is my speech.
Woo.
Good job.
Okay,
Does anybody
so
know how long that was?
uh,
I felt like I was talking for forever, but anyway.
It's okay. It was great.
Thanks.
it was good. You did great. So my section is chapter 10 from the very first page of the chapter to the middle of 273. And my section focuses basically on how decisions are made within a group and the different types of like categories of people like in charge or how they're leading in a group. So ways that a group can make a decision is brainstorming, obviously combining a group together, putting your ideas for your task in, discussing how you can meet the goal, whether you're trying to present on something, whether you're trying to like solve some sort of question. And this gives you the opportunity to be creative, get more people, get your group members involved, and it can also piggyback on different ideas to come up with one solution to the goal you're trying to achieve. And this usually requires more than one person. Obviously, if you're brainstorming, you don't want to just brainstorm by yourself or have members that don't want to help. So the brainstorming helps combine your members. The next was the nominal group, which is pretty much you're nominating somebody for each task. I do believe, yes. And so you will take your, so if I tell Kimberlin, I need you to look up this, and she'll come up with her individual ideas. And if I tell John he needs to look up this, he'll come up with his ideas and I'll do mine, and we'll combine them together to kind of meet our goal in an efficient way. It also helps get over the fear of putting your ideas into a group for whatever task you're trying to achieve. Another way is idea writing, and this is pretty much the same thing, but you're taking your own ideas and then systematically adding them together for like different parts of it, like kind of what we did for each section. So steps for that would be like you assign each category to somebody, and that person only covers that category, and only the facts, the whatevers for that category of like your speech or the information you're trying to cover in something. So after all that, it comes to making decisions in a group, and some decisions are like a unanimous consensus. So like everybody will agree. So if we say we're going to do this at 7, everybody says, okay, we're going to do this at 7. And sometimes people do not always agree, but pressure from the majority of people agreeing to something is going to make you want to agree with it. And you're probably going to regret that later. But because most of the group, you feel pressured. A stalemate is obviously another decision-making thing where nobody can agree on anything. So like I'm wanting one thing, John wants one thing, Ashley wants one thing, Kimberlin wants one thing, and you can't come to a consensus. It kind of adds a lot of tension to the group. And then there's false consensus, which is when you think that a plan is one way and it's actually the other. Like an example is our group meeting times. Like if you're thinking we're meeting at 6:30 and it's actually 7:30 and you get confused and rattled, it's gonna kind of add tension to the group as well. Another, I think the final one for this is the majority rule, and that's clear to everybody, is like if 3 people want to do something one way and one person wants to do it the other, we're clearly going to do it the 3-person way because it's just more fair than kind of not doing it what the majority wants. So, I'm losing pages, sorry. So, and then the next section I covered was very lightly on becoming a leader. So when you become a leader, you definitely have traits that people look at in you, like if you're independent, if you're able to connect your ideas, if you're able to move people, personality traits, if you're approachable, if you listen, if you can problem solve efficiently without causing issues. Physical traits, if you've ever noticed when a leader of a group is a leader, they're usually the more well-groomed, nicer looking, more popular, well-known in society. It's just how it is. Don't know why, it's just how it is. People gravitate towards pretty people. That's just, it's psychology for you. And then another thing people look for in leaders is, can they relate to somebody else? Can they, again, be efficient with decision making and be fair? Are they able to keep people behind them. And then I will let you, Kimberlin, do the next section.
Perfect. So I had the other half of chapter 10, whatever pages that is, I don't know, but the rest. Okay. So leadership is the majority of my section, and it's basically just like the several different like types of power that comes with it. So leaders, are either like put into that role by the group, or they're just natural born leaders and it just happens. So they have different like power like stands within the group. So like the reward power is like the leader's ability to reward another for doing something for them. So like if somebody like the leader tells you to do something, they can, you do it for them, and then after it's over, they reward you with, like, just say at work, the supervisor says, hey, go do this, you do this, okay, now you have the rest of the day off. So that's kind of like they're able to give out awards or any type of reward too, depending on like your job or like where you're at. And then another one is the reverent or the referent power. It's like described as the power of attraction. So kind of like what you were saying, people will do something towards the leader if like they find them more attractive, or if they think that they could be admired, or if they admire the person who is like their leader. So that also works with like celebrities. So celebrities have the higher power with that too, because if they like have something that like for sale, you're more likely to buy it from them, since that's like kind of like their power. You like them, you want to be like them, you look up to them, you buy their stuff that they sell. Another one would be like the coercive power. It's like it's when the person or the leader has the ability like to punish others in the group, which is like my example would be like, if you were at work, you don't do something that you're supposed to do, your supervisor writes you up. So that's kind of like a form of punishment in that leadership power. So the more write-ups you have, eventually they can, fire you. So it's kind of like their way to punish you in a way. And that's only like if that supervisor has that high enough power on the list, I guess, to be able to do that. Because usually like just a person who's your same level of like a worker like you, they can't obviously do that. So it has to be somebody that has those standards and somebody that are high up on the list to do that. Sorry, turning my pages here, sorry. Legitimate power is all about the leader, like leadership status, like how high up in the company they are. So like CEOs are examples of this, or like presidents. So anybody that has to be underneath them has to comply to them, because like they're the top part of that position, and like that's like their leadership role in that company. Expert power is the fifth type of power that a leader can have. It's described as like somebody that knows the most in a certain area, like their expertise. Like you would look up to somebody like who has 20 years experience versus somebody who just graduated. So it's kind of like a certain like standard of how much, how experienced are they, how much they know about it. And then you just pretty much just pick which one you'd rather, you would rather just be with or understand. And I would say that like, so besides like going to school and like having that power, it's more of like maybe you're at a job longer with no experience than somebody who just got hired. So that's kind of like what expert is. And then the last form of power for a leader would be informational. And this is kind of like the most, like the leader has the most access to information that the others would want. So I would say like an example of that would be like at a construction site, like the project manager has like the blueprints, they have like the fine, or like the say of what's going to happen, and like the others underneath him, they need to know that too, so they know exactly how to do their job. So it kind of shows like, so that kind of power is informational, because everybody else wants what they have, so they're going to go to them, they have to be the leader, they have to know exactly what's going on. And so with leadership and power comes the next part, which would be like keeping decisions and conflict in groups steady too. So the leader has to realize that not everybody's going to get along, and they have to like figure out how to constructively keep conflict together. And that's usually like within a group, however many people you have, either like two people or more are struggling to get to the main goal, like they have their own they have their own ideas of how to get there. So they have conflict. And that's like when the leader would step in and kind of figure out like when or like what type of solution that you would have to do to like get rid of that conflict to kind of keep the group going. And there are 5 of those from the book, and they are like, so the competing style is having like a high concern for yourself in a group, but like your needs and your desires within the group, but you have a low concern of everybody else's. So you would want, so let's just say there's one spot, you have 2 people, obviously only one can win. So you would have a higher need and desire for yourself to win versus somebody else. And then avoiding is having like a low concern for yourself and others. So it's avoiding all sorts of conflict within the group. So most people don't like conflict, so they will just avoid it altogether. And when that happens, it's like avoid it to not bring up any more bad things to happen in your group. So like eventually everybody would just forget about it and then move on. Accommodating is having a high concern for others, but a low concern for yourself in the group. So this is like you'd rather keep the peace rather than interrupt like the group work. So even if you have a different thought about how something could go in a group, but everybody else doesn't, you just keep it to yourself regardless. And then compromising style is like a moderate concern for yourself, your needs and your wants in the group and others. So like everybody gets a say in the group under this style, but like you have to give up something to gain something. And usually it's got to be like the same thing for everyone. But depending on like what your group is working on, I suppose it'd be different depending on what kind of group work you're doing. And then the last one of these conflict styles is collaborating, which is having a high concern for the needs of everybody in the group, which is everybody pretty much works together. You get the maximum out of your group work. You get to the end goal. Everybody's there. Everybody's happy. So another one of like the decision-making skills in a group is groupthink, which we all had to write about that. So this is like when the group seeks like a unanimous decision, regardless of individual doubts. So let's just say that we all like, we agree, but then our doubts come up later, but we don't talk about them. So even though we agree to get it over with to avoid conflict, we don't really think about what could come from those decisions. And so like if we don't speak up, then whatever happens, we just have to deal with in a group. And the example I could find was to like compare this to was the Challenger space shuttle. So when that happened, everybody that was on that project agreed to launching the shuttle without like doing like they had to do their final checks, but not everybody realized that it was all good to go, but still the unanimous decision of the group was still to send it in space, and it didn't make it. So that's kind of like how I would relate it to that. So then the last part of this chapter was pretty much listening skills and listening to everybody in the group and how to do that. Obviously everybody listens, but there's certain ways to listen better. And that just depends on like how people get along in their group too. Like if you have people that don't really care, then they're obviously not going to listen. They're not going to respect the group. And then, that causes more conflict. And then being a better listener, next time in a group setting would work a little bit. And then trying to figure out, what's the best method to listen within a group. Like it's easy just to sit and listen, but like to really understand what somebody's saying in your group will help not have a lot of conflict as well. So yeah, I think that's all I have. And I don't really know how to end this because, all of our group wasn't here, so I can't conclude it all together. So we'll just go with that.
Go ahead and end the recording.
Okay, sounds good. Hold on.